Hello, and welcome to the Performer's Guide. My name is Krystin Railing, and today we will be discussing key business partnerships. So the first thing you really want to consider when you're choosing a business partner is, first of all, why am I going into partnership with somebody? And really, there's three reasons that you would want to include somebody else in your business venture. And it's money, time, or other various resources. And I think a lot of times people just jump right into, oh, I have this amazing idea and I want to include as many people as possible in the idea. And me and my best friends want to start a business. And oftentimes when even clients or people come to me with questions, I kind of halt it right there. First of all, what are these people bringing to the table that you're including? I think a lot of times it's just good past experiences and enthusiasm that people are bringing to the table, and not actually one of these three true resources that you need to help with your business. So first things first is really assessing what it is that we're getting from our partners as we're going through this video, okay? And so for me, it's three things: money, time, resources, okay? Then the next thing we want to think about is that the business partnership is the final step to different types of partnerships that we can do, right? And it's the general business partnership, which is the most legally binding partnership that we can have. And I think oftentimes people skip over the strategic alliance and the joint venture, and they jump just right into business partnership. And I like to think of that as getting married in business. It's basically the exact same amount of intimacy. You know each other's bank accounts, you're in each other's emails, you are legally bound through paperwork and licensing fees, which are all very similar in my mind to the depth of partnership that one would have in getting married. And so I just really want people to think of the business partnership as sort of the most extreme type of partnership that we could have with somebody, and that we first want to slide back onto perhaps the strategic alliance or joint venture. And oftentimes we're already doing the supplier-buyer relationship, but really utilizing all of these before jumping into what I consider the marriage of business, a business partnership. And so we're going to go in order of formality, I guess. So the strategic alliance is the most informal. You just are two people, you're combining your expertises. This generally happens pretty naturally, and it's just two people kind of combining resources for a short-term project. Usually you have an idea, oh, let's start this idea, and there's generally no paperwork involved, and it's usually pretty short-term, and you have an idea of the length of the contract, right? And another pro is that you have shared risk, right? And anytime we start to bring on partners, this is great because you are taking on less risk for yourself, even if it's not in a business partnership formally. Even starting the strategic alliance, it sort of takes off social risk, financial risk, and time management as well. But then the cons of it would be, if you have shared risks, that also means you have shared profits. And those profits could be shared 50-50 even, and usually are if you don't have any type of partnership agreement. And so that's honestly, in my opinion, the first con. And I've gone almost into partnership with lots of people, and then the end, it was like, wait, I'm just giving you half of my profit, and I don't actually fully understand what the benefit of this partnership is for the person giving it, you know? And so make sure that if you're sharing your profits, that you really are getting some of those resources that we talked about earlier. The other con with strategic alliances is there tends to be more personal conflict because there's more vague understanding of what's happening. There's not usually a contract or a business partnership agreement, and it's usually kind of built on a whim and for a project that is new. And so there just tends to be more conflict than if you were doing it alone, or if you have do a little bit more due diligence to make contracts and kind of go a little bit more formal. There just tends to be less conflict, right? You also get the commitment issue, and this is often when people come to me and they're like, "Oh, I have business partners, and they're not doing their weight, right? They're not committing to the time." And then when you find out, it's like, "Oh, wait, you're not actually business partners. You're just expecting a lot from this person." Or maybe they are, and you haven't laid out what commitments were actually expected beforehand. And so we'll go over that as well. But that tends to happen most with strategic alliances because they're the most informal. Again, vague objectives. You kind of have like a good understanding, like, oh, I want to do this thing, but there's no business plan written usually with strategic alliances. So it's just very vague. And things usually aren't even written down most of the time. And lack of planning. Usually it's like I said, on a whim, people are like, oh, I want to start this thing, and we're, going to make an event next month or something. And people tend to kind of just jump into it. And so while they are the easiest to get into and they're the most informal, these tend to be the ones that sort of dissolve naturally over a short period of time. And so the strategic alliance and the joint venture are very similar and often confused between the other, okay? And so with a strategic alliance, you just have two companies or two people who are informally coming together to create a new venture, and a new entity could be formed, like even a new business could be formed, but they're still separate from each other. Like, I'm my own business and you're your own business, and we've started a strategic alliance for this thing, but there's no real legal binding for it, okay? And a joint venture is when we start getting a little bit more formal, and it's like a business partnership, but the businesses stay separate, but they form a new business, okay? And so in the joint venture, a totally new business is formed, and you're legally bound to it, both of those people, legally, tax-wise, and such, whereas the strategic alliance, you're not, right? And so for me, those are kind of the biggest differentiating factors between the joint venture and the strategic alliance. Then you have what's the most commonly known, I think, is the supplier and the buyer, right? You have, oftentimes this is specifically for people who have merchandise and any type of shipping product, like a physical product, right? And you could, weave all the cotton into the threads and then sew all the threads into the yarn. And then, it's like you could do all that, or you could just go to the store and buy the pre-made yarn and all the pre-made things, right? And so you can do that scaling with lots of different things. And so there comes a time where you're like, oh, I'm doing a lot. It's like, okay, wait, can I just buy pre-made parts of this and save myself time, and they would make more money and I would make more money, and the customer would be able to purchase a less expensive product? Then the supplier buyer tends to be the most commonly sought after, because it quickly increases your inventory options and diversifies the type of options you can have. And it also decreases your storage needs, because oftentimes that company is holding it, the bulk of it, and then you just buy whatever pieces you need. It lowers your production costs. It lowers your need to hire other employees, and it also saves you time and money from having to actually make the items, right? Which overall increases your production value, which is better for the client because they're getting a better valued product for a lower price. And it's better for you because you're also having lower costs and lower inventory and higher diversification, and the supplier is also gaining benefit because they have a new customer. And so the supplier buyer tends to be the most easily like win-win-win for business owners. And I think that's why they understand this one the best, usually when they talk to them. And then we have the general business partnership. So there's all these other options and ways that we can work with other people before we jump into the partnership. And I always say this, it's the marriage of partnerships, right? You have to file it with the government. You have to do a business tax license, which is kind of like a marriage license, right? You have to both sign it and get it stamped for approval. And you do a business partnership agreement, just like you would do a prenup agreement. Shared bank accounts, shared just energy in general. And it's we want to really make sure that we have anytime like, oh, I'm going to jump into a business partnership. I always want to say, make sure that you've actually done business with this person over a long period of time before you jump into this, because, and especially if you do it without any kind of business partnership agreement, it can get really entangled when you're ready to stop being business partners and you don't have any clear understanding of what the exit plan is for your business, okay? And so that's what we're going to go over next is, now you understand the different types of partnerships that you can have. Now, how do we engage with these people in a way that is clear and actually benefits us to alleviate the resource needs that we need, right? First step is your business partnership agreements. And these come in a few different ways that you can have agreements, right? You have your general business partnership agreement, and then you have a roles matrix diagram, which is a diagram that actually divides up the roles of the business and who's doing them and who's actually accountable for those roles. And then kind of the exit plan, your dissolution of partnership. And I think it's really easy to go into any business like, this is gonna be forever. Just like we go into a lot of marriages, right? This is gonna be forever. But most partnerships actually aren't forever. In fact, over 50% dissolve. And so we just want to go into it expecting the best, but preparing for an exit plan. And what happens if someone leaves, someone dies, someone just loses interest? You know, there's all these different things that can happen that can dissolve a partnership. The classic irreconcilable differences, artistic differences, right? Classic for dissolution of partnerships. So we just want to first have a clear understanding when we're going into it, what's expected, have a clear understanding during the partnership, what roles we expect the other person to do, and the exit plan of how to dissolve the partnership. So step one, business partnership agreement, is why do we need to have a written agreement, right? Otherwise, what's going to happen is each state actually has their own business partnership rules that they default on. And if you don't have a business partnership agreement, that whatever the state's rules are, that's what it's going to be when you do business and then dissolve your partnership, which usually ends up being 50-50 partnership. So unless, like for me, I wanted to remain 60-40. And so you would have to write that into your thing. Maybe you're only selling 10% of your business. In that case, you definitely are going to want to have a business partnership agreement. Otherwise, it's just going to go to the states 50-50, and that doesn't work in your benefit, right? The business partnership agreement also really clarifies management duties, financial duties, decision-making rights, voting rights. Voting rights, you can even say like my vote counts for 2 votes and your vote counts for 1, and it's more difficult when it's just one business partner to one business partner. It actually is better to have multiple business partners, because then you don't get that sort of tug of war back and forth on the voting, which is actually a common problem I've had with just having one business partner. It just ends up kind of becoming a headbutting with your voting rights. And so you kind of just want to nip that in the bud, that one person has overarching voting rights on these topics or those topics versus the other person. To just kind of nip those arguments in the butt. Partnership agreements also reduce money-related disputes. Where does the money go? Who's taking what in? Who's allowed to do what? Who writes checks? Like, who's actually handling the money? Maybe you just have a financial advisor and they're the ones managing the money. What? You want to really, especially with the money, really have a clear understanding of what the rules are and what the consequences are when somebody, embezzles money, when somebody doesn't add the money up correctly, someone doesn't, cash checks correctly, things like this. Like, what are the repercussions of those things? And you also, so this is a big one. And this is especially if you want to maintain control of ownership any more than 50%, is if you have a business partnership agreement and you actually file your business paperwork and really do the paperwork properly, it controls just random people joining the project, right? And I think that this has happened with a few clients of mine where it was just a few people and then all of a sudden it snowballs and it's all these different people, and now they're all making the same amount of money as the original people who are doing actually much more work. And so just really having all of that thought out and before adding on more people, right? Like, to also go back to what are they actually adding? Time, resources, money, and how much ownership control are we willing to give to each person as they buy in? And this is when you start to create like shares, right? And so you have 100 shares or 100%. How much percent do I own and you own, and how much are we selling those shares for to new people? And what are we getting for that? And then the business partnership will also establish your exit plan. And so this, when you're doing your partnership dissolution, it'll fall back to whatever you wrote on your business partnership agreement first. And then if there's nothing, then second, it'll fall to whatever the state's rules are. And then third would be your verbal agreement if you didn't have a business partnership agreement, which is not usually the best time to be making verbal agreements, because usually if you don't have an exit plan and didn't have a business partnership agreement and you're ending your business, you're like not in the best terms probably. It's not necessarily the best time to then be talking about your exit plan. So we want to have all of that mapped out before we even go into partnership with anybody. And it's kind of weird to be like, okay, let's talk about the exit plan before we've even started, and to even go in as deep as what happens if you die before you even become partners with somebody. And so this is why it's like, okay, it's kind of like marriage. It's like very personal, kind of have to jump into these nitty-gritty questions, and you really want to do it before things get heated and then the partnership ends. So then the next step is to create a roles matrix diagram, which you would then include into your business partnership agreement. And it's helpful to make this before you even have a business partner, just as you start to make things and do things and realize what your tasks are, you start listing them out, and I'll have an example of what it looks like on the next slide. And then you can start to add in more people, right? Because if one of your resources is time that you need, then the roles matrix diagram is really going to be helpful for somebody who wants into your company but has no money, but they have a lot of time and they have a lot of enthusiasm and they're really going to work for it. Then you can start dividing up percentage of your business based on how much time this person's actually going to give you. And you would basically like sell, they would buy in with their time instead of with their money. Okay. And so it's called roles matrix diagram, but it's also called the RACI model. And it's called that because you have 4 roles that you can be in this. And it'll make more sense in a second when I show the thing. But most of the time people think, oh, everybody's responsible for everything. Or at one point, you're responsible for literally everything. And then somebody else jumps on, and then it's confusing. How responsible is this person now for these new tasks that they're just learning or just jumping into, right? And so you have 4 levels of responsibility. You're either the first person responsible, you're accountable, which is like the assistant, essentially. You're not responsible, but you'll be held accountable if it doesn't go correctly, right? Consulted is, I'm not in charge at all. I'm not accountable for this. This isn't my task. But if you need me, I'm here. And you can consult me for it. And then informed is, don't consult me. I'm not accountable. I'm not responsible, but I just need to know when the task is completed, because that my next task is like hinged on that for some reason. And so I need to be informed whether it is going to happen or not on time and the details of that. Okay. So RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And so like, here's just a generic, it didn't upload clearly, but generic RACI model, right? And so you have your team members up at the top, and it, you know, if you're just doing a basic partnership, it could just be you and one other person, or it could go all the way down to having human resources, a management team, project management team. You know, and the more employees you have, the more important it is that you utilize one of these, honestly. So up at the top, the colored lines are your employees, your partners, people that you interact with. And then down the line is the activities, which are broken up into genres, right? And so this is when you literally just start listing out all the things, and you know, you're going to be responsible for everything at first. And then over time, maybe you'll have a business partner, and then it's just responsible, and then they're accountable, or maybe they're not at all and it's 100% on you. And then once you start adding the 3rd and 4th people, then you really start utilizing all of the letters, and it really just helps with taking the burden off of your mental plate and compartmentalizing things, and really creating a good flow of communication for what's expected from who. And I love this model, and it really helps with both taking on business partners, especially ones that don't have money, but anybody, right? Because they're going to be taking on tasks. And then the second one would be for when you start adding on employees, and kind of then becomes sort of your timesheet of like what's expected from where. Then there's the separate dissolution of partnership, okay? And so it'll have been discussed in your partnership agreement. And so when it's time to dissolve the partnership, you'll first go there and look at it and make sure that your partner actually knows that you're ready to dissolve the partnership. And usually it's a mutual agreement, but sometimes it's like one person wants out, you know, and they'll talk to their lawyer and they'll review the partnership agreement and they'll sort of draft it kind of like divorce papers. And so one person will sort of draft the first round of dissolution. And it includes splitting up of the assets. It includes splitting up of the clients, getting a business evaluation and making sure that you're both on the same page about how much the business is worth, and how much each person is willing to pay for their shares. And one person's usually it's either going to be one person's buying out the other or vice versa, or you dissolve the assets and split up the money between the two monetarily. And so I've gone both routes, I guess. Yeah. One where I sold my business to somebody else, and then the other where, especially if you're just doing like a joint venture or a strategic alliance, it'll just usually be a dissolving of the assets. You just started a short-term project, you dissolve it, or if it's irreconcilable and the project's just over, then you'll usually, but if the business is still thriving and one person's like, hell yeah, I'm going to keep going, and the other person's like, I'm done, then you just buy them out. And then there's an official dissolution form that basically just lets the government know, hey, this person's not my business partner anymore. And then you have to let the your clients, and usually there's some sort of official notification on social media and like in the newspaper of new owners, ownership change. You'll often see like restaurants or something, they'll be like new management, under new management. You legally have to do that just to let people know. Otherwise, it kind of curtails, I guess, just illegal business changes of some sort. But you have to notify people, and then settling and closing out the accounts. So bank accounts and social media accounts, your purchasing buyer seller accounts. And so all of that can take like 6 months to a year. Like I know even when both my business partner and I were like, yes, we agree, let's do this, let's sell. He's like, bye. But it still took 6 months to get the lawyer to do all the paperwork, because, you know, once you also include a lawyer, their time between meetings sometimes was longer than anticipated. And, you know, bank meetings and all these things kind of just take longer than you want them to. So just kind of be energetically aware of that. I don't think neither my business partner nor I were ready for that. And by the end of it, we were just like, and we luckily did have a partnership agreement, but it didn't fully cover all of this. And so I learned a lot of these things from trial and error, honestly. So yeah, really be sure of what type of partner you want. Have a clear business partnership agreement with them. Be clear of the roles that they are providing for you, and have a clear exit strategy with them. And this is going to make your partnerships in general much easier to manage them coming in and out, and they won't feel like whirlwinds sometimes. So I hope this was helpful, and thank you again so much. My name is Krystin Railing. This is the Performer's Guide, and have a wonderful day.